At 5 a.m., with frost still on the grass and my dog growling behind my legs, I stood there watching two police cruisers splash red and blue lights all over my backyard gazebo. 30-plus wedding guests stared at me like I was some criminal barricading myself inside my own home. And when the older cop flipped through my documents and looked straight at me, then at them, and said, "This entire structure is on his property," I realized something terrifying and satisfying at the same time. Today was the day the HOA president Malene Crow finally lost. I didn't move to Silver Pines expecting a war. I came for the quiet, slow Saturday morning's coffee on the deck, a yard that felt like mine. That fantasy survived exactly 6 hours. The gap between unloading the moving truck and meeting Malene for the first time. She emerged from her perfect lawn like a prison warden checking her rounds, clipboard tucked under her elbow, eyes narrowed like she was already calculating which line item I'd failed to meet. She asked where I worked, what hours I kept, whether I understood the association guidelines. I told her, yes, I do, and she frowned as if comprehension wasn't something she expected from new residents. I tried to brush her off as background noise, the kind of neighbor you avoid by pretending you're on an important phone call every time you see them. And for a while it worked. I was too busy building my cedar gazebo, a solid city-approved structure that I measured so carefully I could have done it blindfolded. That project wasn't just a project. It was my piece, my corner of the world. But on the first night I sat under those warm solar lights feeling proud and smelling fresh cedar, I spotted her standing on the walking path behind my fence, staring at it, staring at me, like I'd personally offended her. 2 days later, the violation letter came. I had erected a structure on community property. I didn't yell, didn't storm across the lawn. I wrote a calm, clean letter with attachments, my survey, my permit, the specific CC&R clause that proved I was 100% compliant. Sent it certified. Because folks like Malene only respect authority when it's printed and stapled. HOA never responded. I thought I'd won. Oh, how stupid that was. A couple weeks later, my neighbor Jenna's sweet, excited leggings and future Mrs. sweatshirt ran up my driveway out of breath. She asked to borrow my gazebo for her sunrise wedding photos. And not just her 34 guests, photographers, bridesmaids. The whole parade starting at 5 a.m. I explained politely that my backyard was private, that I worked from home, that I wasn't comfortable with dozens of strangers at dawn. Her smile twitched, then stretched into something more plastic. "Well, it's kind of for the community," she said. And Malene said it's technically part of the shared aesthetic. That phrase should have been my warning. Shared aesthetic. HOA people invent words when the real ones don't benefit them. I said no. Jenna's smile finally died. And that night I got an HOA email complaining about my lack of cooperation and hinting at future approvals. That's when I realized this wasn't about a wedding. This was about obedience. For 2 weeks, violation letters hit my mailbox like clockwork. Edging uneven, trash cans too visible, porch light too bright, vehicle possibly stationary on my own driveway. I documented every ridiculous claim with photos and timestamps, and every time I proved Malene wrong, she got angrier. Not openly, no. Quiet angry. The kind where she'd squint at me from across the street like my existence was a personal attack. The night before Jenna's wedding, I found a courtesy notice taped to my door. "The board will review the appropriateness of your gazebo at the next meeting." I didn't react. Just slid it into my binder, each tab labeled, each letter filed. Some battles you win before they start simply by keeping receipts. But nothing, and I mean nothing, prepared me for what happened next. At 4:47 a.m., Moxie, my small but mighty dog, growled at the back door. The latch on my gate rattled. Hard, like someone was testing whether it would break. Outside, shivering guests whispered, heels sinking into the frozen grass. Someone said Malene said he'd open it. A shuttle van idled on the path, hazard lights pulsing like an impatient heartbeat. I cracked the door. A woman in a glitter shawl snapped, "We need the gazebo. It's freezing." "You're on private property," I said. A man answered, "Don't make this harder than it needs to be." Then from down the path, Jenna's voice, "Is he opening it?" Malene said she talked to him. And here she came, Malene herself, marching like a general, quilted coat, clipboard in hand, ready for battle. "Open the gate," she ordered. "No." You're obstructing a community event, and you're trespassing on private property at 5 in the morning. She drew herself up like a pelican ready to screech. That gazebo is part of the community aesthetic. That's not a legal term, I cut in. And even if it was, it doesn't override the county survey. She threw her hands up. Fine. If he won't be reasonable, the police can sort it out. When she actually dialed 911, something inside me cracked. I stood in my foyer, coffee shaking in my hands, listening to her tell dispatch that I was hostile, escalating, denying access to community property. For a second, just a second, I wondered if I was wrong. If maybe letting them use it would have avoided this chaos. Maybe I really was making things worse. That was my breaking point, my moment of weakness where I almost opened the gate. But something held me back, the simple truth that I'd done everything right. When the police arrived, the crowd filmed like this was some courtroom drama. Jenna looked ready to faint, and Malene stood behind the officers like a maestro conducting outrage. I stayed calm. No yelling, no theatrics, just documents, survey, permit, HOA emails, every violation letter, every screenshot, every shred of evidence that she had waged a petty war. The officers walked with me to the back fence. The older cop slid his thumb down the paper, nodded, and turned to the crowd. This structure, he said loudly, is entirely on his property. No one may enter this yard. If anyone climbs the fence or forces the gate, he can press trespassing charges. Silence. Jenna looked sick. The shuttle driver muttered, "They did all this for a gazebo." Guests shuffled away in embarrassment. But Malene? Her face cracked. Just a second. But cracks spread. When the police told everyone to leave, she stood frozen, as if she could glare the law into changing. That was the turning point. I requested the 911 records the same morning. The desk officer raised an eyebrow when I explained the situation. "She called emergency services," he repeated slowly, "because you wouldn't let people use your backyard. That's exactly what happened." "Then yes," he said, sliding the complaint form toward me, "you should file this." Word spread fast. Silver Pines suddenly woke up. Neighbors remembered their own run-ins, bogus fines, intimidation, public shaming. Connie, a retired teacher, brought a notebook filled with dates and witnesses. Aaron, 3 houses down, brought a stack of letters identical to mine. And then Jenna came over with puffy eyes and banana bread, apologizing before she even crossed my threshold. I believed her, she whispered. She said the gazebo belonged to the community. I didn't realize she was using my wedding to push her power. "Did she put that in writing?" I asked. Jenna scrolled her phone, paused, then handed it to me. There it was, black and white, HOA letterhead, a lie so bold it practically smoked. The neighbor cannot deny access. That was the final nail. When the HOA finally handed over the documents I'd requested, the corruption spilled out like a ruptured pipe. A landscaping contract costing double market rate, all paid to a P.O. box belonging to Ronnie's cousin. Unreported reimbursements. A violation pattern that matched only one thing: obedience. 3 weeks later, Silver Pines held the most crowded HOA meeting in its history. People stood in the hallway, chairs filled, arms crossed, no one afraid anymore. Malene sat at the front, chin lifted, nostrils flaring like she still had control. I walked up with my binder and presented only facts. Connie provided witness logs. Aaron provided spreadsheets. Jenna read her email with a voice shaking with anger and regret. For the first time since moving in, I watched Malene Crow run out of script. No more rules to twist. No more threats to hide behind. Just a woman cornered by truth. The recall vote was swift. The new board elected before she could finish protesting. Within a week, she got a citation from the city for misuse of 911. Within a month, she was forced to repay thousands from unauthorized reimbursements. And before the season ended, a moving truck sat in her driveway, swallowing up her reign of intimidation piece by piece. Now some nights I sit under my gazebo, the one that started it all, and listen to the quiet. No more letters, no more threats disguised as policies, no more rattling gates at dawn, just peace. And if I learned one thing from this war with the HOA, it's this: power doesn't belong to the people who shout the loudest, only to those who stand their ground.